I'm going to do California briefly because it illustrates a really unique set of issues that come together. And then we'll turn to Louisiana, where I think it's going to be the platform on which these issues are going to head into the public arena as we struggle for a model of national infrastructure response. Louisiana will be the template on which the discussion goes forward, not just for Louisiana, but the entire American coastline. California, on the whole, has coastlines which will not be heavily, in a relative sense, impacted by rising sea levels. And the reason is that it's on the tectonic edge of continental movements. Now, California and the Pacific coast happen to be at the edge of one of these plates where the tectonic activity is keeping things moving up instead of down. There is one extraordinary exception, and it's called the California Bay Delta. It's an odd phrase that doesn't resonate. It's entirely out of the public mind, nationally and even in California. But the geography of that state is such that between the coastal range and the Sierra Nevada is this long, low-lying central valley, drained from the south by the San Joaquin River, from the far north from the Sacramento River. They converge in a delta, which is originally pre-settlement a gigantic marsh near sea level, extending from Sacramento down toward Modesto and Stockton, and then coming to a discharge point in San Francisco Bay. Settlement brought about some remarkable engineering changes, a really stunning history of innovation. The first thing that happened was pretty predictable. The Tule marshes were cleared, levees were built, and it was the beginning of the most productive agricultural region in the country. But there were upstream water issues and water issues to the south in the San Joaquin Valley, which were dealt with in a really innovative way. Step one was building gigantic reservoirs in Northern California where water is abundant. It was done in the form of first a federal and then a state project. The federal project was anchored by Shasta Dam, and then the innovation consisted of releasing water from the northern dams down the Sacramento River to run in regulated fashion, and then constructing a gigantic pumping facility right in the heart of the delta at near sea level, just before the rivers run to the sea, and constructing a canal which runs hundreds of miles directly south into the arid part of California. If one good thing is appropriate, well, the answer is you need more. So under Governor Pat Brown, the state looked at this system and said, we'll build another one. And they went to Oroville on the Feather River, way north, built another giant dam, came down into the delta and built another one of these pharaonic pumping plants connected to a canal, which actually runs all the way through the valley, a couple thousand, at least 1,000 feet over the Tehachapi Mountains, down into Los Angeles and on to San Diego. So at that point, we have an infrastructure system sitting on the coast that is the anchor for the water system for more than 2/3 of California. So what's happening today, now that we've come through all this? Well, climate change has arrived. The most comprehensible one, interestingly enough, to most people, is up in the Sierra Nevada. When all this infrastructure was put together, it was recognized by the engineers that the real reservoir in California is the snowpack in the Sierra Nevada. Millions of acre-feet stacked up across the Sierra, vastly more than the storage capacity of the dams on the downstream rivers. And by a nice kind of convergence of nature and man, that huge snowpack accumulates and stores all of that snowfall during the wet season, the winter season in California, releases it in the form of spring melt, which runs down into the big storage dams, but is carefully released exactly as the beginning of the water consumption season starts in the Central Valley in Southern California. So the reservoirs were simply a regulatory valve for the real storage up in the Sierra Nevada. And what is happening? The snow is turning to rain. The snow line is moving up, up, up. The numbers are there. You can see them. So what happens? Well, the wet season, the snow season, now turns to rain, which is moving down in big winter bursts, overwhelming the dams, which are not in the business of releasing much of it for use, and they're becoming flood control dams try to manage winter flood control without the capacity and the conservation space to store up the slow melt that runs from spring to summer. So all of a sudden, the storage system looks to be less than adequate. The big problem is that these two pharaonic pumping structures sitting right at the mouth of the river are now nearly at sea level, and that 3 feet of water coming up will do what? Well, what it means is that the residents of Los Angeles and San Diego are going to be drinking salt water, because those plants are going to be in the middle of saline water coming up, rising from San Francisco Bay. So what is California? A few other problems. The levees that were put up in the marshes are holding agricultural land which is subsiding. The organic soil oxidizes and gradually settles, and so you've got a land use problem on top of it as development moves outward from, particularly from Sacramento into the Central Valley. Well, what do we do about it? I'm not here to explain that. It's going to be a very large workout. It's going to involve either got to move the water infrastructure to higher ground or find some way to move the water around the delta to the pumping plants. You've got to take the pumping plants up to the river or bring the river in some other way through the intakes. Obviously, we have a state, federal planning and finance issue. This infrastructure was all built under the leadership initially of the federal government, and California has just begun to recognize the issues, although we're a long ways from a plan, which I will explain my view of, which is that that plan is going to be the necessary predicate for federal participation. And it'll have to be comprehensive in thinking about water use and managing urban development, land use, and the reconfiguration of agriculture. My real focus today is Louisiana.